Guild Master of the Food Hall? Asher asked curiously as he nodded her head. Yup, got a problem with that, she asked, finishing her apple before burning it to ash. Reaching into her inventory, she pulled out another apple. While she loves meat, she's been enjoying these apples lately. They were crunchy and sweet with a nice texture. Let's see. One guy who's knocked out. Check. There's you too. That girl there and a monster. All right, everyone's here. Let me take you to your rooms. Would you like a flat, apartment, or house? Ian asked while checking Shiro's message. Before that, can you tell me about what you meant earlier? Asher asked as Ian glanced up. About what? The fact that Nitha is tier 5 but doesn't have a human form like you. Are you perhaps a monster? Asher asked as Ian nodded. Well, I guess anything that isn't human is classified as a monster. Mum started as a monster as well, but she had a human form due to her race. As for me, I'm a phoenix. Ian smiled, snapping her fingers. Fire erupted out around her as a pair of eyes appeared within the flames. Dispersing the flames in an instant, the party widened their eyes, seeing Ian in her phoenix form, with purple feathers lined with hints of blue and red. She glanced down at Nitha, who seemed to be in awe before transforming back to human form. Though I don't really like using that form since the taste of food is dulled. Ian shrugged. But as I said earlier, there should have been an opportunity for you to become human. I became human much earlier, though it might be because of my race. If you want, after I take you to your new homes, I can try to help you reach human form. Hearing this, Nitha nodded her head vigorously. So have you guys thought about it yet? What kind of house do you want? And what platform do you want it in? Ian asked, handing them each a tablet that had all the available places marked out. Seeing a map of this city along with the platforms available, they couldn't even begin to imagine how much land this must take. Aren't you worried about tier 6 monsters such as dragons attacking this place? We saw a dragon destroy a somewhat large settlement a while back. Asher asked as Ian couldn't help but laugh. PFT, ahaha. Do you think a dumb lizard can do *T against Mum City? First of all, I want to ask you this question. How many tier SIXS do you think are in this city? Ian smiled as Asher furrowed his brows. 3, he guessed. If Ian had him guess, it means that there must be more than one. Wrong. There are more than 5, and there are more coming too. Now let me ask you, how many people do you think can kill tier 5s in this city? Ian asked as Asher frowned. You can give a percentage if you want. Ian chuckled. 40%. Wrong. Everyone can. Ian grinned. What? That's impossible. Are you saying everyone in the city can, even children? Cadme asked as Ian nodded her head. Yup. It's not that they're strong, but it's the tools that we have. Ian smiled. With a bit of training, even children can kill a tier 5 being. Plus, we're also flying in the sky, so the only monsters that can target us are the ones that can fly. She shrugged. Hearing all of this, the party didn't know how to react since a city of this strength seemed fake. But seeing how serious Ian was, they knew she wasn't joking. Looking at each other, they figured that it's probably best to see everything for themselves. Discussing with each other for a moment, they decided to get a rather big house for all of them with enough space so that Nitha can fit in as well. Sure, that can be done. Follow me. Ian nodded. Taking them through the corridors, the party couldn't believe what they were seeing. With the technology in this corridor, they felt like they were in a different world. PST. Hey, are you sure we're still in the timeline? Like what the hell is this? Cadme pulled Gordon down and whispered as he shrugged his shoulders. Don't ask me. I'm the dumbest one here. Gordon replied. Actually, I think that's me. I don't do much here except look after the food hall. Ian interrupted since she could hear them whispering. Is that something to be proud of? Cadme thought to herself as they continued to follow Ian. Glancing out of the window, they could see the city and noticed a myriad of races walking around without conflict. Demons, demi-humans, elves, and so on. Remembering the scene of the apocalypse, it was as if this city was in a dimension of its own. A utopia. Taking a deep breath, Asher looked down at the city in a trance. Glancing up, he could still see the pillar of light in the distance which represented the relic appearing and understood that this was all real. Seeing this, Ian smiled and waited for them since the people that came here for the first time always had that kind of reaction. It was perfectly normal. If we have time today, I might cook them a banquet at the food hall. Ian chuckled since they technically helped bring Lyrica's father back. ####. Bringing Edvamar to the med bay, Lyrica sent out a message to Sylvia, who teleported here using a teleport node. You said that there was a serious patient? Sylvia asked as she glanced to the side and saw Edvamar secured to the bed using a mixture of chains and bandages. If you wanted to do bondage, you could have done it in your own room rather than the med bay, Sylvia said as she glanced at Lyrica. Oi, that's my dad. I had to secure him like this since he kept wanting to get up. Lyrica replied immediately, as the only one she wanted to tie up was Shiro. Wait, your dad? Isn't he supposed to be dead? Sylvia asked in shock. Yes, he is, but long story short, he's not. He's heavily injured, so I want you to see if you can heal him. Lyrica replied as Sylvia nodded. All right, give me a few moments. Walking over to Edvamar, Sylvia snapped her fingers as a tier 5 magic circle appeared above him. Scanning his body, Sylvia noticed that his passive healing was being hindered, and there seemed to be something slowing down how quickly his mana travels around his body, which would hinder healing spells. Tapping the terminal a few times, retrieved a few small stickers of sort. Placing it on his body, they acted as anchors as a tier 6 formation materialized using these points. Watching everything happen, Lyrica leaned against the wall with a worried face. Sigh. Lyrica, even though you said that your dad is alive, I wouldn't class him as such. Much like Shiro, it's a miracle that he's even standing, walking, or doing anything right now. His soul is damaged to the point where his mana is directed to holding it intact. Once he runs out of mana, Sylvia didn't need to finish her sentence as Lyrica's heart pounded in shock. What can we do then? Lyrica asked. The best we can do right now is constantly supply him with mana. I haven't been able to heal souls, yet hence why Shiro is still injured. If we can keep supplying him mana, there's a chance that he can be properly healed in the future. Sylvia replied as Lyrica bit her nails. Don't worry. I won't be fighting for a while so I can tough it out. Edvamar smiled as Lyrica looked at him with worry. You haven't let me finish yet. I said that I haven't been able to heal souls yet, but with Shiro's mastery, she should be able to help you stabilize it if nothing else. It'll decrease the amount of mana you'll need to use. Sylvia said as the two of them nodded their heads. All right, speaking of Shiro, I still need to put up the barriers. Lyrica said as she pulled out her tablet. How come? Aren't we far? Actually, if Shiro told you to put up the barrier, we probably should. Put it on the maximum, just in case, since you can never trust what Shiro says when it comes to the power of attacks. Sylvia paused as she remembered who they were talking about. MN. ####. Dashing through the trees, Shiro approached the corrosive area. Glancing around her, she made sure that she was alone before activating a camouflage skill and sent a few drones ahead. She wasn't sure if the area was still around, so if it was, she'll just kill this avatar. Once this avatar died, she wouldn't be able to spare enough energy to make a second one. Thankfully, it seemed like the zone had shrunk as the drones ventured forth without any problems. Taking a deep breath, Shiro followed after the drones. Dashing through the corrosive zone, Shiro could see that it was now completely barren. Even the dirt on the ground had been turned to mush, and each step would cause her to sink down. If she didn't make herself flat with mana, she would have been waist deep in this corrosive mud. Strangely enough, there was a path of sorts, leading towards the Twin Peaks. The path was pathed with a strange marbled material, and since she didn't see this earlier, she could assume that someone must have been here before her, but the fact that there was some sign of the material being corroded, it must have been placed before the aura shrunk down. Who would even put something like this here? Shiro thought to herself, however, she wasn't about to leave this alone. Snapping her fingers, small portals appeared as she immediately sent the marbled material back to Asharia. She wanted to see if Helion could make some armor with his, so that it would be highly resistant to the corrosive element. Plus, if her nanobots couldn't stand up to this aura, then it's safe to assume that the final product might become something quite crazy. Glancing around her, Shiro could see that most of the queens are still preoccupied with their own fight, so she could enter without any problems. Continuing towards the Twin Peaks, Shiro made sure to stay out of sight. Upon reaching the base of the mountain, she noticed that there was actually a gate leading underground rather than a path towards the mountain peak. Activating analysis, her vision seemed to be blocked off from peering underground, but she could see that there was a hollowed path in the center of both mountains. Noticing countless runes etched into the walls, Shiro furrowed her brows before approaching the gate. Pushing it open, she immediately noticed a few crests carved into the walls. Quite a few of them are unfamiliar to her, but she recognized a few of them. Zeus and Poseidon are involved, huh? Shiro thought with a frown. Understanding that Nyx was watching, there wasn't much that she needed to do since Nyx will sort it out for her. Looking around the room, there were several paths leading down, but what attracted her attention the most was a set of Tier 8 magic circles that flickered between realms. Looking up, she could see a small path leading up to a tower positioned between the two peaks. The walls of the tower were packed with runes as she could sense that mana was being gathered towards the peak. Suddenly, the crest started to shine. Noticing the density of divine magic increasing by the second, Shiro frowned and looked towards the large hall that connected all of the paths together. Immediately feeling divine energy lock around her body, Shiro clicked her tongue and slammed her hand down. Erupting out with her own divine energy, she broke apart the restriction as she could see an armored swordsman looking towards her. "Are you the trespasser?" he asked as Shiro shrugged. "Trespasser? Are you saying that this is your home? If so, I must apologize." Shiro replied as he nodded his head. "This is indeed not my home, but I am in fact the guardian of this place. Until the relic appears, none is allowed to enter this place. There has already been one person that had trespassed, but he left before I could kill him. I suggest you do the same," he warned as Shiro thought about it for a moment before smiling at him. "Sure, I don't mind leaving. I do have a question though," Shiro said as the guardian narrowed his eyes before sheathing his sword. "Speak. What is your task? Do you stop people from obtaining the relic, or are you responsible for keeping it safe?" Shiro asked. If his goal was to keep it safe, she might have to deal with him with her avatar while the weapon fires, since there was a good chance that he could stop the attack due to the fact that he is clearly above tier 6. With the divine energy that she could sense from him, he could very well be a tier 7 demigod. "I stop people from obtaining the relic before the promised time and stop them from setting traps. Please leave the premises, or else I will have to deal with you accordingly," he warned as Shiro raised her hand. "Sure, but one last question." Shiro smiled. "Speak. If someone was to try to destroy the relic, what would you do?" Shiro asked. "Impossible, but if they do attempt to destroy it before the promised time, I will prevent the destruction of the relic." "What about after the promised time?" "I am only to protect the relic before the promised time. My duty is over once the time has come. Now leave before I attack," he warned as Shiro nodded her head. Leaving the room, she activated her divine energy and created a few nodes. Since this was creating using her tier 8 attunement, it should be able to avoid the guardian's detection. Unfortunately, Shiro immediately sensed danger behind her as she ducked down and barely avoided his sword. "You had been warned. Now pay for your hubris." The guardian glared at her as he reached towards the back of her neck. "TCH, it's not kind to grab a lady's neck like that," Shiro replied as she kicked back with her heel. Tilting his head, the guardian dodged her kick as a gun barrel materialized next to her foot. Asterisk bang. Firing without hesitation, Shiro created some distance between the two of them. Clicking her tongue, she could see that the bullets did nothing to the guardian since she couldn't spare too much energy for this avatar. Without saying anything, the guardian flexed his fingers as tier 7 magic circles started to form around him. Understanding that she couldn't defeat him, Shiro didn't hesitate to slam her hand down and make some preparations instead. A tier 8 magic circle expanded out as Shiro started to layer this entire room with nanobots. Narrowing his eyes, the guardian crouched down before slashing towards her. An invisible blade of energy exploded out as Shiro could sense danger increasing in front of her. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to move out in time as the blade cut deeply into her torso. Asterisk cough. Coughing up a mouthful of blood in her real body, Shiro swayed on the spot as Nantian quickly rushed over to her. "What happened?" he asked in shock as Shiro immediately healed herself. In that single strike, her avatar was killed in one attack, and the strike actually injured her real body. "I was scouting out where the relic will appear, and there was a guardian there. He's stronger than tier 6, and it seems like he can target my main body even through an avatar. Thankfully, it doesn't seem like the damage is serious," Shiro replied as she had been forced to expend a charge of grace. While she did say the damage wasn't serious, that was a lie, and it would have killed her in one go had it not been for her self-heal skills. Hearing this, Nantian furrowed his brows in worry. "Don't look so worried. I can still keep the weapon intact." Shiro chuckled. "I'm not worried about the weapon. I'm more worried about you." Nantian sighed deeply. "PFT, I'm sure you know that killing me is quite hard." Shiro laughed as she stood up. "Yes, but it doesn't cause me to worry less." Sorry about that then. I do have more information though. This tier 7 guardian won't stop the weapon after the relic appears. But before that, he'll be protecting the relic." Shiro replied as Nantian furrowed his brows. "Isilia," Shiro called out with a smile. What is it?" Isilia glanced over curiously as Shiro walked towards her. "There's a guest back in Asharia that I'm sure you'll be excited to meet. It's a bit dangerous right now, so I'll need you to stay in space for now, but I can let you call him through video call." Shiro smiled. "Call who?" Isilia tilted her head. "You'll see." Shiro winked as she started a call to Lyrica. "Lyrica, are you able to turn on your camera for a moment?" I want your mother to meet our guest. Shiro chuckled as Lyrica nodded her head with a smile. Mom, I bet you'll be surprised. Lyrica called out as Shiro handed the phone to Isilia. What would I be surprised about? Isilia chuckled. Trust me, Mom. 1,000,000 gold to say that you'll be surprised. Lyrica laughed. I don't think I've thought you to gamble now, have I? But fine, I'll humor you. 1 gold to say that I won't be surprised. Isilia rolled her eyes. In that case, then say hi to Dad. Lyrica grinned, turning the camera around, revealing Edvamar, who was sitting in bed. Upon seeing Edvamar, Isilia widened her eyes in shock before looking over at Shiro. You got 5 minutes. Shiro smiled, opening a portal. Giving Shiro a quick hug, Isilia rushed through. Chuckling at her reaction, Shiro ended the call to give them some privacy before looking through the cameras she had left on Earth. Now that she couldn't make another avatar, she'll have to observe everything through cameras. Teleporting to the med bay, Isilia felt tears well up as she saw Edvamar sitting on the bed with a soft smile. Flashes of memories of when they were together in the Elven continent filled her mind as she wrapped her arms around him. Holding on tightly, afraid that he might disappear, Isilia looked up at him before kissing him on the lips. I thought that you had died, Isilia said as her voice quivered. Seeing the tears that rolled down her cheeks, Edvamar smiled softly before placing his hand on her face. I did, but now I'm back. Edvamar replied with a smile as Lyrica took a step out of the room, leaving her parents to have some private time together. Looking back into the room, Lyrica couldn't suppress her smile as the day seemed brighter than ever. Stretching her body, she thought back to how she wanted to venture out on her own for a bit. Maybe I should delay that, she thought to herself while quickly doing some last-minute checks on the barriers. After all, this is Shiro they were talking about. No amount of preparation was enough. While she was checking on the barriers, she noticed Ian walking with the humans that had been teleported in earlier. Realizing that she forgot all about them, Lyrica couldn't help but facepalm. *T. Quickly jogging over, she apologized since she was too preoccupied with her father. It's fine, Mississippi. Since it's your father, it's understandable. Asher chuckled. Still, I forgot about you lot, even with an injured patient next to you. Lyrica said, looking at Lyle, who was unconscious on Gordon's back. He's just knocked out. Gordon shrugged. Speaking about Lyle, there's something I'm curious about, though. Cadme spoke up as Ian glanced over. His brother was killed in front of him by a queen, and the white-haired girl who saved us said that she had to knock him out before he became a fallen. Can you explain to us in more detail about that? Cadme asked as Asher nodded his head since he was also curious. Is that what Mum said? Perhaps it might not be a good choice for you to stay in this city just yet. It's not that I want to kick you out, but rather the fact that there are 3 queens living here. If a queen killed his brother, there's a high chance that seeing a queen anywhere would trigger his transformation. Ian spoke seriously as the party listened. When your friend becomes a fallen, you can say that he will lose all chances of becoming human again. It's best that you let him become stronger mentally before coming here, or else it's over. Hearing this, Asher frowned before sighing. I suppose that's true. Plus, I plan staying outside anyway. Asher smiled as Cadme and Gordon widened their eyes. Isn't this the paradise that we've been looking for? A safe haven? Cadme asked as Asher nodded his head. It is, but here's the thing. I think there's so much more I can be doing outside. While it's more dangerous, it feels like I'm fulfilling my purpose in life. Asher smiled as he looked down at his hands. Plus, from what I know, your mother only saves those with good souls, right? Asher said as Ian nodded. Yeah, what about it? Those with dark souls must have done something evil. Letting those people in would only ruin things. Ian shrugged. Yes, but there is a chance of redemption even for those with darker souls. I can't say much about those that have committed truly heinous acts, but I'm sure that there is always a chance for them. I want to keep roaming the world, get stronger on my own, and help those that are in need. Plus, I also want to show them that it's perfectly fine to live without a queen. While we might be lucky in finding someone like your mother to help us, others might not have the same luck. I don't want them to stay further and work for an evil queen like some of the ones that we had seen in the forest. So thank you for the offer of living here, but I think I'll be roaming the world some more. Asher smiled as Gordon and Cadme looked at one another before sighing heavily. He's right. Living comfortably like this is good, but I also want to help people who have suffered just like me. I was a thug in the slums when my life was changed. I want to give others this second chance as well. Gordon sighed as he scratched his head. I'm just tagging along with my friends. Cadme chuckled. That's quite admirable, but surviving out there is hard. Obtaining food for yourself is difficult, and it becomes harder when more people are involved. I'm sure Mum doesn't mind giving you a hand in providing food for the people. Or at least I won't as the guild master of the food hall. Ian grinned as Asher nodded his head. That would be helpful, but I won't resort to this unless I'm backed into a corner. If we want people to believe that they can survive without queens to avoid being used by them, we can't get help from one. It's a matter of building trust with them. Asher replied. True. Very well then. But you have to let us provide you with a bit of protection before you leave and venture off into the world. It's not much, just some weapons, armor, and a way to contact us if things get rough. Oh, and some rations too before you leave. Ian smiled. If it isn't troublesome, then I would appreciate it. Asher nodded. Of course not. Oh, by the way, if you want to stay a few hours, I'll see if I can help Nither out a little. For now, though, let's go to the food hall. I'll cook you something myself. I'll also make sure that your little friend is in his state of sleep for a little longer so that he doesn't become fallen after seeing things related to queens. Ian chuckled as Asher nodded his eyes. However, when Lyrica heard this, she was surprised since everyone knew that Yin's dishes were hit or miss. It either tasted like the best thing you had ever eaten or it tasted god-awful. It was a gamble. If it turned out good, you'll be the happiest person alive for the duration. If it wasn't good, at best you'll be hospitalized. It was roughly 70% chance of it being good and 30% chance of it being bad. Ian was quite experimental in one sense when it came to her cooking. As they were making their way out of the tower, they noticed that the sky started to darken as more Tier 7 and 8 magic circles appeared like a web in the sky. The mana that was being released into the atmosphere started to dense into light mist, but was soon dispersed due to the overbearing power being radiated from the magic circles. Standing in front of the tower, Ian frowned at the magic circles in the sky before continuing towards the food hall. Seeing this, Asher and the rest of the group was a little confused since Ian seemed to not care about this phenomenon. If you don't mind me asking, is this not something that you're worried about? Asher asked as Ian glanced over. You mean the Tier 8 magic circles? Not really, since I know it isn't an attack. It's just a phenomenon caused by the relic appearing. If anything, I'm more worried about what my mum is going to do. I can already sense that mum is straining herself quite a bit, so the weapon she's preparing must be rather crazy. Ian shrugged while the party followed behind her. Little did they know, crazy was a bit of an understatement, as Yin's dictionary had become just as dysfunctional as Shiro's. After witnessing quite a few of Shiro's achievements, she has been desensitized by the axe. Meanwhile, Shiro was looking down at the earth with narrowed eyes. She could see the magic circle forming as it was visible from space. All of the tiny Tier 8 magic circles seemed to form a pattern when they're viewing it from this height. Similar to her formation that she had created back in Tokyo, the sheer size of this formation was one that Shiro had never seen before. If all of this energy was converted into a weapon, the outcome would be devastating. No wonder the mass of flash that appeared killed everyone. With this much energy being pumped into it, I'll be more surprised if it didn't kill everyone. Shiro thought to herself. With the formation being visible from this height, it was quite simple to determine the center of the formation even without the prior knowledge of the Twin Peaks. Taking a deep breath, Shiro did some final calibrations to make sure that the weapon was aimed properly. Waiting patiently, she could sense the power of the gods increasing within her body as Madison opened her mouth. The relic has appeared, she shouted out, knowing that Shiro couldn't see the system right now. Just as Madison shouted out, Shiro could see all of the magic circles light up with a brilliant flare. Narrowing her eyes, she could see a portal of sorts opening in the sky as she immediately stepped towards the weapon. Pressing her hands against the surface, her aura flared as all of the compartments started to hum. Immediately noticing a change in aura, Hemera glanced towards Shiro, who had divine energy coursing through her body and into the weapon. Is it finally time to fire the weapon? Hemera muttered while floating next to Nantian. She was currently helping him direct all of the power from the sun towards the weapon. Yup, with the relic appearing, we'll need to get rid of it as soon as possible. Nantian smiled. Asterisk clack TSSSSS. Looking at each of the parts that started to shift, Hemera noticed the dungeons being inserted into the main body of the weapon like cartridges. The moment each was inserted, a set of runes would light up as coils protruded out of the weapon, releasing steam as heat was building up inside the weapon. Even with her mastery over ice, Shiro was struggling to cool down this weapon as energy surged through the body. Out of the hundreds of dungeon cartridges that she had created, there was a single one that's different from the rest. A black and red cartridge that had circuit patterns etched into the surface. That cartridge held a concentrated mass of error that would only be inserted at the final step. much like how Error upgraded her sword when he swallowed it. She was going to do the same with the weapon. As the dungeon batteries were inserted into the weapon, Tier 8 magic circles started to flicker around the weapon as the space around them started to distort. Even with all the help she was getting in maintaining her body, she could still feel her muscles tearing apart from the energy coursing through her. Taking a deep breath, she gritted her teeth and powered on. Images of what she had seen from her future self appeared, as she didn't want to see an ending like that. It didn't matter how much she pushed herself right now. She refused to see the dead corpses of all her friends. ####. Looking at everything that's happening with a frown, Addie could sense the connection between him and Shiro weaken as the mana realm started to break apart. The walls started to crack as water filled the gaps in an attempt to fix everything. He could see Nimue sitting in the middle with her brows creased up as her figure started to break apart. Her humanoid shape wavered as it was on the verge of being turned back to liquid. Izul was also trying her best to help, but there was only so much her healing could provide. Looking down on his hands, Addie looked back at the two that are trying their best right now and took a deep breath. Clenching his fists, fire erupted out of his body, burning brightly. The fire reached towards the ceiling of the mana realm as Addie bit his finger. As the first droplet of blood appeared, it was immediately disintegrated, but he didn't hesitate to make the wound bigger. From one drop to a constant stream, Addie's face paled as patterns emerged on his body. His flames grew in size as Izul forced her eyes open after sensing a change in her surroundings. Seeing that Addie was doing, Izul widened her eyes. "Addie, stop it!" Izul shouted out, but Addie smiled. "Mommy needs help," Addie said as his flesh started to tear apart. The cracks that formed within Shiro's mana realm started to repair itself as Addie's flames helped Nimue's water. As they were both divine spirits, merging the two wasn't too difficult. Biting her lips, Izul sighed heavily as she rushed over to Addie. "If you're going to burn life force, at least burn mine. Auntie Izul's a nature spirit. My life force is the strongest out of everyone." Izul sighed as she placed her hand on Addie's shoulder. A green aura exploded out from her body as the plants around them started to grow. Glancing up, Addie was surprised since he had wanted to do this since he was young and had life force to spare. With both Izul and Addie providing life force for Shiro, the burden on her mana realm decreased as some of the cracks started to heal. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough as new wounds were opening with each passing second. Hoping that things will turn out well, Addie closed his eyes and prayed. ####. Sitting on a distant mountain, Cyrodiil narrowed her eyes at the darkening skies. The menacing Tier 8 magic circles spread far beyond what the eye could see, and the world seemed to age before their eyes. With the surplus of energy, trees matured and withered in a blink of an eye, and new saplings took their place. Is she still not making a move? Cyrodiil thought to herself. Looking at the portal opening above the Twin Peaks, she was thinking of making a move herself. *KRSHKKK. Hearing the roaring of thunder, the clouds that hung above the Twin Peaks dispersed as day and night seemed to trade places. The brightness of the magic circles made everything around them seem dark, as even Cyrodiil had to shield her eyes for a moment. Sensing the shift in atmosphere, Cyrodiil could feel goosebumps on her arms as she decided to wait no more. Standing up, she took a deep breath as mana gathered around her. Staring into the orb of light, she saw the faint silhouette of a crescent greatsword emerging from within. Recognizing it to be the corrupted relic, she immediately prepared her spell but paused when she noticed a second spike of mana. Instead of mana, it seemed to resemble the relic. "Divine energy," Cyrodiil muttered. Tilting her head back, she furrowed her brows when she couldn't see anything but the Tier 8 magic circle of the relic. Clicking her tongue, she closed her eyes for a moment before opening them again. Her eyes were now filled with a slight golden glow as the barriers seemed to fade from her sight. Widening her eyes, she saw the source of this energy, stretching beyond the horizon even from that height. She could see the black silhouette of a giant cannon with neon energy channels flowing through its body. Countless runes blended together into a single color. Hundreds upon hundreds of bright red coils filled the side of the weapon. Focusing a little harder, Cyrodiil could see a merging of mana and divine energy gathering towards the center of this weapon. Halting her breath, she couldn't believe a weapon of this power could be created so soon. Even in her prime, there was little chance of her surviving unless she activated some of her one-time use skills that she had received. Suddenly, Motes of light lit up on the side of the weapon as Tier 8 magic circles formed a barrel towards Earth. Each of them seemed different, but Cyrodiil could recognize a few of them. Signs of a berserk skill? How do you even fit that onto a weapon? She thought to herself before danger overwhelmed her senses. Immediately slamming down her hand, she wanted to make a portal to escape, but it was too late. A single flash of light filled her vision as she was able to see that it was condensed into a thin line no larger than her torso. Space distorted around the beam as swirls appeared in her vision, as if God had just used a mixing tool. She could see parts of the earth being stretched overhead as it became the sky. The mountains became circles, and the skies disappeared. Focusing on a single point within this area of thousands of meters, space collapsed as lightning rippled out, eviscerating everything in its path. *KRK. Within the line of energy, red circuits appeared as a giant maw made from these circuits exploded out, consuming the entire mountain range as every single speck of mana was absorbed. Feeling her body weaken, Cyrodiil couldn't help but kneel down on one knee as she realized something shocking. Whatever had just appeared just devoured every single source of mana within this region. The reason why ambient mana could even appear was due to an invisible source constantly supplying mana through a totem of sorts that existed in a different dimension. Even in the other gardens, she was never able to locate where the source was, but she knew that reaching this dimension was difficult. However, the attack had just wiped it out without any problems. Quickly activating her eyes and peering into the different dimensions around this place, such as the rift, she could see that the attack was multidimensional. It didn't matter where you were in terms of dimension. As long as you were in that area, the attack would still hit you. The attack only lasted for a short instant, but within that instant, the twin peaks were no longer visible as only a deep hole could be seen in its place. Furrowing her brows, Cyrodiil was about to move when she realized that the attack was over. Like a black hole, the epicenter of the explosion started to absorb all of the mana from the surroundings. It's trying to fix all of the dimensions that she just destroyed. It's even trying to drain me of my own mana. I suspect that this place will become a dead zone for several decades with how much damage she caused. Cyrodiil thought to herself as the mana required to fix a dimension was astronomical. Add on to the fact that the source of mana in this area has been destroyed. The only way it can get mana to fix itself is from external sources, such as people or plants. Even if it drained every one of its mana in its vicinity right now, it still wouldn't be close to repairing itself. At most, it'll be 0.5%. Clenching and relaxing her fist, Cyrodiil guessed that all of her mana would be drained in around 30 minutes or so, and that wasn't including her regeneration. Glancing up at space, she could see the weapon shattered to pieces as the Tier 8 magic circles disappeared. Pieces of debris started to fall off the weapon, but they were soon disintegrated by the barriers. Chuckling to herself, Cyrodiil realized that her worries were for nothing as Shiro had it covered from the start. I guess I was thinking too much. I suppose I should continue to level up until I reach my peak again. There are still plenty of things to deal with, and the new age had just begun. Cyrodiil muttered as she turned around and prepared to leave. Poochie. Just as she was about to leave, a sword stabbed through her torso as her eyes widened. Looking down, she could sense her energy being completely drained in an instant. Gritting her teeth, she wanted to grab the sword, but the owner pulled it out before she could lay her hands on it. Sleep. A cold voice rang out as Cyrodiil felt her mind waver. Who are you? She forced out, but she heard no reply. She wanted to turn around so that she could see her assailant, but her body gave in. Falling unconscious, Cyrodiil's body was covered with a faint dark green glow. Glancing back, the owner of the sword made sure that she was unconscious before looking up at the sky with narrowed eyes. There, they muttered before disappearing from the spot. Just as she fired the weapon, Shiro sensed a wave of backlash as her mana and divine energy was emptied out instantly. With her body devoid of energy, it was difficult to keep herself afloat as the blast sent her crashing through space. Gritting her teeth, Shiro couldn't stop herself as the only outcome was drifting off for a while until she could get her mana back. However, with her not being able to maintain the portals that provided energy, their oxygen supply had just been cut off. But before she could be launched far, Nantian managed to catch her just in time as he used his mana to stabilize the both of them. I would love to talk, but we're running out of air. Nantian smiled as he looked down at the pale Shiro. He noticed a faint cracking mark stretching from her arm to the rest of her body. The cracks were created from an ominous red energy that seemed to grow with each second. However, he didn't have time to worry about that just yet as he grabbed a teleport node and looked towards Madison. She was also launched by the explosion, but unlike Shiro, she had mana to stabilize herself. What a show. I can see why Mom's interested in this girl. But with the relic destroyed, my job is over, so this avatar is going to disappear in a few moments. Himura sighed before glancing over at Shiro. I'll tell you what's happening before I leave since it's rather serious. She's receiving a system backlash since she had used something that exceeded the world's power before the world was ready. Now that it's come to this, there are two choices. Either A, let the world break apart, or B, let her body take the brunt of the damage. That is the choice given by the system, and seeing as though the world is already taking quite a bit of damage, the rest of it is transferred back to her body. While she does have the blessing of the gods for now to reduce some of the damage, the blessings won't last long. She'll need to prepare herself since the moment the blessings end, she'll be put under a lot of pain. Himura said as she could see the hole created from the blast all the way from space. All of the mana around the blast had been drained and nature withered away from the lack of mana. Around the epicenter was a circle of black and brown, which contrasted with the white snow and green forests. Had she not focused all of the power into a single point, a continent would have been wiped out. She could faintly see the glow of lava within the hole, but it was being buried by the rocks that fell off the side of the hole. Is there anything I can do to reduce that backlash? Nantion asked as it pained him to see Shiro breaking her body even more, especially when her soul was already damaged. Unfortunately, no. But with tenacity, I'm sure she'll survive. It'll just be extremely painful. Himura sighed as her figure started to fade. But one last thing before I leave, just so that you can protect her well. Snapping her fingers, her crest appeared on Nantion's hand as it radiated with a golden hue. Unlike the blessing I gave you when you funneled your power into the weapon, this one is permanent. Himura smiled as her figure completely disappeared. Thank you. Nantion bowed before flying over to Madison's side. Seeing that Madison was trying to recover from some backlash of her own, Nantion grabbed her arm and prepared to activate the teleport node. But before he could, Shiro stopped him. No, don't activate it. Go back to Asharia and bring Icilia to space. For oxygen, you, Icilia, and Madison can just insert mana into the suit, and the portal bringing the oxygen will open again. We can't let Icilia stay on Earth since she's being hunted by the Watchmen. For safe measures, bring Edvamar here too. Shiro forced out while gritting her teeth. She couldn't be restrained by this amount of pain when she needed to bring her best friend to safety. Hearing this, Nantion furrowed his brows before nodding his head. Inserting some mana into Shiro's suit, he opened a portal back to Asharia and dashed towards the med bay while Madison looked after Shiro. What the hell? Theria shouted out in anger as she gritted her teeth. Looking at the hole that replaced the relic, she seethed in anger as all of her preparation was for naught. All of her plans, crushed with a single action. Taking a deep breath, she tried to calm herself, but failed. Retreat. We're going back to the city. There's nothing for us to gain here anymore. Theria commanded as she started to walk away from the area. Now that the rainbow relic was gone, she might as well go back to cultivating her strength. She'll prepare herself for the next battle. One by one, the queen started to leave the area since the relic was now gone. Without the treasure, there was no point sticking around when there was another nuke known as the Dragon Empress. Staying now would just be a suicidal act. A few of them were curious as to who was responsible for the destruction caused, but brushed it off as the work of gods since only gods could use Tier 8 magic circles. With the relic being able to summon Tier 8 magic circles of its own, the one who destroyed it must be able to kill a god. With the queens leaving the region, everything became quiet as not a single sound could be heard. No wind, nor animals. Dead was the best way to describe this place. This marked the end of the first rainbow-grade relic to have appeared in the New Age, destroyed before the world could learn of its power. However, despite not being able to obtain the relic, a few queens managed to obtain new alliances during this period and had already begun to plan their next steps. After all, the New Age didn't end with just a single relic. How dare she? A voice muttered in the void. Just as it had entered the world, it was struck down by a blinding light, which severely damaged its body. Strangely, it could feel its reservoir of divine energy decrease as though something had absorbed it. Taking a few deep breaths, it glanced through a screen and searched for the face of its enemy. Upon seeing the visage of a white-haired girl suffering from the backlash, it burned her image into his mind. If the backlash didn't kill her, it'll do it personally in the future. Sitting in the small space station that Shiro had made for Madison before creating the weapon, the party of Nantion, Isilia, Madison, and Edvamar sat around a bed. Lyrica had wanted to come, but there were more things to deal with back in Asharia. Laying in the bed was Shiro as the red cracks continued to spread through her body, forcing her to take sharp breaths from the pain. Looking at her pale face, Nantion felt as though his heart was getting crushed and glanced at Edvamar. "How long do we have to wait? We can't stay in space forever," he asked. With the watchman chasing Isilia, they had to keep her out of his sight, or else she'll be taken away. Not too long, hopefully. Since he is a Tier 8 entity, staying around would put a strain on his body. Even if the system allowed him into the world, there is still a limit. Edvamar replied, tightening his grip around Isilia's hand. "I hope that is the case. I want to get her some help back on Earth, but as Hemera said, this is a backlash we can't alleviate." Nantion furrowed his brows while looking at Shiro, who was sweating on the bed, grabbing the bed sheets. Shiro gritted her teeth and tried not to scream or cry since the pain was like pouring hot lava through her body, only much worse. After all, if it was lava, she could endure that kind of pain with ease. Gasping for air, she wanted to grab onto anything that might reduce the pain that she was feeling. Seeing this, Nantion quickly held her hand down as Isilia and Madison did the same. Crack. Feeling his bone fracture slightly from her grip, Nantion flinched as Madison had to activate her berserk skill to contest against Shiro. T. Madison couldn't help but curse since she couldn't even begin to imagine how much pain Shiro was feeling for her to act this way. This was a girl who casually punched through her own stomach or ripped off her arm so that Sylvia could test out her healing spells. And yet she was now thrashing around in the bed while gasping for breath. The dark red fractures that spread through her body pulsed with each second and were different to the circuits that appeared when she used error. This was more sinister, and even though she wasn't the one being targeted, Madison could feel a burning sensation whenever she touched the fracture, which made holding Shiro down much harder. Unable to hold it in anymore, Shiro opened her mouth as a heart-wrenching cry rang out. Quickly casting a silent spell so that their ears didn't get ruptured, Isilia wanted to find something that'll help her relieve the pain or something that might stop her from crying out. If she continued to scream like this, she'd destroy her throat in a few minutes. Gritting his teeth, Nantion took a deep breath as he snapped his fingers. Motes of light appeared around them as they transformed into cuffs that secured Shiro to the bed. Reinforcing them as much as possible, he created cuffs around her limbs and torso to stop her from moving around as much as possible. If he restrained her like this, she could at least exert her strength on getting out rather than harming herself to take her mind off the pain. Glancing towards Edvamar, Nantion gestured for him to follow him out of the room while Madison and Isilia tended to Shiro. "Is there a way for you to know when the watchman leaves?" Nantion asked as Edvamar nodded his head. "When the watchman leaves, I'll suffer a bit of backlash, but I should be able to stabilize myself afterwards. Thankfully, I won't be forced to leave since I separated myself from the system. Though this also means that becoming stronger is now much harder, and with my focus on sustaining myself, I can't get stronger even if I wanted to." Edvamar shrugged. "I'm in well with how many tier SIXS we have. You should be able to live a safe life. Lyrica and Isilia would be heartbroken if you were to die." Nantion smiled as Edvamar nodded his head. "But seeing my wife and daughter on the battlefield while I'm at home is a bitter feeling, haha. As a husband, I should be Isilia's shield. As a father, I should be preventing my daughter from being exposed to dangers like this." Edvamar sighed. "Perhaps, but your daughter is strong. You can't keep her shielded forever. They always outgrow a parent's company eventually." Nantion chuckled. "True." Edvamar nodded with a smile. "Oh, if you don't mind, can you tell me about the life that my daughter has been living in the time that I was gone? I'm aware that she might have hidden some things from me, so that I don't worry." Edvamar asked as Nantion thought about it. "I don't know too much since I wasn't around, so what I know she's probably already told you." Nantion smiled apologetically, since he somewhat understood the feeling and why he wanted to know. He was absent for a majority of her life, so it was understandable that he wanted to know about what he's missed. "Is that so? Forget it then." Edvamar smiled. "While I am unable to tell you much about your daughter, can you answer one of my questions?" Nantion asked as Edvamar nodded. "Ask away. How did you separate yourself from the system? And what kind of consequences come with doing so?" Nantion asked. He knew that the system was dangerous, but at the same time beneficial. It was akin to using poison to fight poison. While it saves you, it is also a danger. Shiro mentioned that in the future she had gotten rid of the system, so there must be a reason for doing so. While they don't know the reason yet, it's probably best to make some preparations for this. What's your authority level? If you're not high enough, the system will censor it out, so even if I wanted to tell you, I cannot. Edvamar sighed. How do you check? You say the following lines, but with your name, of course. System command. Display authority level of entity. Edvamar dashed. Edvamar smiled as Nantion nodded. Replacing Edvamar's name with his own, he saw a flickering screen in his peripherals as it displayed his authority level. Apparently my authority level is 6. Is that high enough? Nantion asked, but Edvamar shook his head. You need at least an authority level of 7. How do you upgrade your authority level? Nantion asked curiously. I believe you have to reach the required tier. Honestly, I don't know much since I was able to distance myself from the system through luck. Edvamar smiled. I see. Wait. If you no longer have the system, does that mean information isn't censored for you? Nantion asked, as Edvamar nodded. Furrowing his brows, he started to tell Edvamar everything that's happened when they went to retrieve the garden shard so that Shiro could make the anchor. Listening silently, Edvamar widened his eyes in shock since that meant the system had been lying to all of the queens, and only Shiro had the chance to reach the ending. Plus, with this being the final run, if Shiro fails, everything ends. Frowning deeply, Edvamar took a moment to digest all of the information he had just received. This is quite shocking. If I still had the system, I think that if I didn't have at least an authority level of 8, this would be censored. Edvamar said as he glanced back up at Nantion. So we need to do everything in our power to keep Shiro alive then. Yes, I'm not sure about how we can tell the other queens so that we can turn them into allies, but for now, we have 5 primordial gods supporting Shiro, so when they arrive in the second half, we should be good to go. Nantion said, but Edvamar shook his head. Do you know how to win, though? He asked. Isn't it just a battle royal? Until one remains, no. Nantion replied, but Edvamar shook his head. It's the system. Do you really think it's so simple? Why would it allow someone who only knows how to kill others to become the ruler of the new host world, if that's its goal? Edvamar asked as Nantion furrowed his brows. You mean to say that there's a good chance that Shiro will need to persuade more people to join her? Yes, but with her not being able to share the secret that only she can obtain the final rewards, I'm afraid it'll be difficult since most of the queens are selfish with their own goals taking priority, so finding someone to trust will be difficult. What about the contract then? If a queen signs a contract with Shiro, can't she ally with them without worry? Nantion asked, but Edvamar shook his head. I'm not sure since the news about this contract is new for me. But if that's the case, then that's the best we can hope for. Waving his hand, a figure shattered the barriers blocking him from space one by one. Breaching it with ease, the true sky revealed itself as he spotted a small building orbiting Earth. As Edvamar and Nantion were talking to one another, they both suddenly stood up in shock as they noticed a small portal opening in the corner of the room. Understanding that no one but them should have the portal to this space station, they both raised their guards as Nantion prepared a few spells. Kish. A sword pierced through the opening as Nantion immediately activated his spell, launching several Tier 6 light swords towards the portal. Crush. A cold voice rang out as the swords shattered to pieces. Slamming the sword down, a figure started to step through the portal, widening his eyes. Edvamar's face paled as his breathing quickened. Bind. The figure spoke again as an invisible force latched onto their body, stopping them from moving. Gritting his teeth, Nantion opened his mouth. He wanted to shout out a warning, but the figure only pointed his sword towards Nantion. Silence. Feeling something blocking his voice, Nantion started to panic as this person was much stronger than what they could have expected. He couldn't sense any mana from him at all, and if not for the fact that he saw the portal, they wouldn't have noticed him at all. Wanting to cast a spell, mana erupted out of his body. Dispel. All of the mana dispersed in an instant as Nantion could only look at the figure powerlessly. The man wore a set of black armor with no helmet as a hood hid his face from them. All they saw was a pair of blue glows that seemed to represent his eyes, but they couldn't see any emotion in them. There were small capsules on his belt secured by a chain as a tattered waist cloth obscured some of the capsules from sight. With Shiro suffering from her backlash in the next room, Nantion wanted to stop this man here at all cost. There was no guarantee that he wouldn't harm Shiro. Gritting his teeth, he tried to break free of the bindings as his muscles felt like they were about to explode from how much strength he was exerting. Remembering that Hemera gave him her blessings, he wanted to see if he could use that to contest against this figure. However, before he could do anything, the figure placed a hand on Nantion's head. Sleep. Feeling a wave of fatigue wash over him, Nantion could see his visions blur. Snapping his eyes open, he didn't hesitate to bite off his tongue in an attempt to keep himself awake. The figure's eyes seemed to flicker for a moment before he spoke again. Sleep. Feeling another wave of fatigue wash over him, Nantion wasn't able to move his body at all since he was bound. Plus, he couldn't cast any spell since he would just dispel it. Thinking about this, Nantion decided to risk it. Detonating the mana within his body, he destroyed his eardrums to forcefully keep himself awake, while also trying to block out his words that seemed to hold special powers. However, there were still bindings locking his body up. I'm taking a note from your book, Shiro. Nantion smiled as he detonated the mana inside his body once more. Shredding his joints to pieces, Nantion gritted his teeth and activated a regeneration skill before slashing towards the man with a light sword. Asterisk clang. Blocking it with ease, the figure looked towards Nantion with confusion since it wasn't his goal to kill him. As long as he slept, he would be spared. What was causing him to go so far as to destroy his body just so that he could move again? Bind. Activating his magic once more, the man wanted to stop Nantion, but he only shredded his body to pieces once more before fixing it with his skill. I don't know how she does it, but this hurts like AB*TCH. I really can't hold a candle to her at all. Nantion laughed as he charged towards the figure once more. He could guess that he was the watchman, and if what Edvamar said was true, all he needed to do was delay him as long as possible so that he's forced to leave. With Shiro in the next room and the watchman's target next to her, he had to delay him as much as possible. He didn't know if he should be happy or sad that they didn't notice the fight in the next room, but there wasn't any time to dwell on these things. Unleashing a flurry of blows against this figure, all of which were blocked, Nantion slammed his hand down as a Tier 6 magic circle appeared. With his other hand, he activated Hemera's crest, which caused the figure to pause for a moment. Dispel. Asterisk ping. Shattering the magic circles apart, he stepped towards Nantion and wanted to stab at him, but Edvamar suddenly flickered behind him with a sword in hand. His clothes were bloody as he had used the same method as Nantion to break out of his bindings. While he wasn't as strong as he used to be, he still couldn't sit around doing nothing while his wife was in danger. Halt. Suddenly, the space around the figure seemed to freeze as both Nantion and Edvamar were frozen in their place. Repel. Without giving them a chance to break out of this, the figure spoke again, and their bodies were flung against the walls of the building. Bind. Chain seal. Speaking 3 words in quick succession, Nantion watched as chains wrapped around his body before a Tier 8 seal appeared in front of him, draining him of all energy. Nantion couldn't even muster up the strength to shout as a motes of light gathered in front of the figure. Leave, Hemera warned as divine energy erupted out of her. Since she had only recently come into contact with this party, the system restriction around her was a little loose compared to the restrictions around her mother. She could manifest herself more and perhaps even fight. However, she still had to be careful since there was still a limit on what she could do, or else she'll suffer a similar fate to Shiro. However, she couldn't let the goal of this person succeed since she understood the consequences of letting him kill Isilia. Shiro would fall, and the world would end. The natural balance of things cannot be disturbed. The target has violated this, and I am to retrieve her. The figure spoke as his words lacked the magical properties they contained earlier. And so is the revival of a dead person. Don't be so petty. Or are you really going to challenge my authority? Just so you know, the girl in there has a group of gods backing her up. Hemera warned as divine energy exploded out from her body. Even if I leave, more will come. This job is to be completed regardless of who completes it. If not by my hands, it will be by another. At least with me, I can reduce the casualties. So goddess, please step aside. This is my show of respect towards a Tier 8 being such as yourself. Do not involve yourself any further than this, or you will suffer disastrous consequences. The figure warned as he stabbed his sword down in front of him. Can't you make an exception for this? Don't you know that it's the last cycle? Hemera narrowed her eyes since Nyx had told her everything. Thankfully, the system restriction around her was lax, or else she wouldn't know anything about this. Just like how Zeus was ignorant, or else he wouldn't have antagonized Shiro like this. It seems like what you said was not something I should know since it was censored. Regardless, I have a job to do, and this is my final warning. If you let me complete my mission now, there will be no casualties other than her. If I fail, the next one who comes may not be as merciful. There are many coveting my position, and I am replaceable." The watchman sighed, but Hemera laughed. "I know you're replaceable, since I'll make a job opening right now." Waving her hand, spears of light condensed around her as they seemed to absorb all the light from their surroundings. "So be it." The watchman sighed, tracing his finger along the blade. Several tier 8 magic circles appeared as he opened his mouth. Track, cut, poison. Dashing forward, he slashed towards Hemera, who blocked his strike with her spear before counterattacking. She had heard of this kind of magic before and understood how powerful it was. However, there was a flaw. If the action mentioned in the word fails, the caster will suffer the consequences instead. So if he were to try to use the word kill on someone who couldn't be killed in one go, he'll be the one suffering the effects instead. With strong enemies, he had to be careful with his word choice, hence why he chose the words track, cut, and poison instead of words like halt or bind. If they fail, he'll be bound, giving Hemera a chance to kill him in one strike. Glancing back at the room holding Shiro, Hemera took a deep breath and hoped that she'd be enough. Because at the end of the day, she knew that she was no match for this person in front of her. Countering the watchman's attacks with her spears, Hemera gritted her teeth since it was hard to find an opportunity to strike at him directly. Behind her was a room with an injured person along with his target, so she couldn't use anything too ridiculous. Their power had to be constrained within the small space that they're given right now. However, there was a second choice, and that was to drag him away from this place. Grabbing one of the spears, she twirled it in her hand before piercing it towards his throat. As the watchman parried her blade, she immediately forced it down before using it as a vault to launch her body forward. Kicking towards his head, Hemera narrowed her eyes and tilted his head out of the way just in time. Repulse. The watchman spoke as an invisible force immediately slammed against Hemera's body. Clicking her tongue, light focused at her fingertip as she pointed it at the watchman's eye. *KST. Firing the spell, she watched as he ducked down and deflected her strike with his blade. Burning a hole into the building with ease, Hemera frowned. "I don't want to do this since I want to delay him as much as possible, but if we keep fighting, we'll continue to destroy the building. He doesn't care, but I do," Hemera thought with a frown. However, just as she paused, the watchman took this chance to close the gap. "Obscure, numb fatigue." He spoke quickly as his figure disappeared from Hemera's sight. Before she could even curse out, she felt the blade pierce her torso as she immediately scattered her flesh into particles of light before recreating her body a little further away from the watchman. "I'm not a fighting type, so I don't have too many skills geared towards killing a person. However, even if I don't focus on fighting, I'm still a goddess. I can't lose this easily," Hemera thought as she slammed her hand down. A tier 8 magic circle expanded out as Hemera opened her mouth. "Do you know that light particles are everywhere? As a goddess that has her divinity tied to light, you can say that everything in existence is within my attack range. Even in the void, as long as you can perceive something even if it's barely noticeable, I can attack it since light is present." Hemera smiled as she glanced at Nantion. "Watch carefully," she shouted out as millions of tiny specks of light suddenly appeared around the room and surrounded the both of them. "Ivarni," Hemera shouted out as in a single instant, the watchman's body was filled with holes that seemed as though a burning needle had pierced through him. Widening his eyes for a moment, he opened his mouth. "Recover." Fixing the damage in an instant, Hemera couldn't help but feel a little irritated, but a word like that must have its limits. He won't be able to use it too often, and while he may not show it, there is definitely a backlash or a restriction. Instead of backing off, Hemera charged forward. Her body suddenly disappeared as she appeared behind the watchman. Pulling her spear back, she pierced towards him as he quickly tried to parry, but her spear disappeared along with her arm. Since she has a divinity of light, it's only natural that she could manifest her body separately as long as light was around. Sensing danger behind him, the watchman changed his guard as he was barely able to block it in time. With her spear being blocked, Hemera didn't stop her attack there. Twisting her body, she kicked towards him as more motes of light appeared around them. Seeing all of the attacks, the watchman narrowed his eyes and slammed his sword down. "Void," he spoke coldly as blood splattered around him. Looking at him in shock, Hemera didn't think that he was able to use a word to obliterate everything in the space around him. Quickly repairing her body, she jumped back and brushed her hand against the wall as tier 8 magic circles appeared. "Reinforce, void, attraction force." destroying the space around him and instantly using that empty space to pull him towards Hemera. The watchman stabbed his sword into her chest as he pinned her against the wall. Coughing up a mouthful of blood, Hemera grabbed the watchman's arm with a crazed look in her eyes. The most up-to-date novels are published on Light Novel World. Calm. I finally caught you for good. She grinned as a multi-layered Tier 8 magic circle bloomed behind her. Suddenly, the two of them disappeared as Hemera had dragged him into her divine domain, the manifestation of her divinity. Standing in the center, the watchman only looked at Hemera calmly as they were in the middle of a grassland as the sun was rising in the background. My divine domain's a little different compared to others. I cannot activate it unless I physically grab someone and drag them in myself, so when a battle starts, they usually have an advantage as they're able to use their domain without the worry of me countering it since I can't activate mine as long as they keep their distance. Hemera smiled as her aura started to grow. However, once in my domain, my divinity can perform at 100% of its power. I'm Hemera, primeval goddess of day, daughter of Nyx, the primordial goddess of night. In my domain, the sun will forever be at its highest point. My powers will be sustained at maximum output. Clasping her hands together, fire erupted out everywhere as the grassland disappeared and the watchman was surrounded by a sea of fire. Since she was the goddess of day, her divinity extends from light to fire. Looking at the sea of fire, that the watchman sighed heavily. Seems like there will be one more casualty in this mission. It won't be fatal, but you'll be heavily wounded. I apologize for that as you are still a goddess in the end, but you forced my hand. He sighed. While there are many who covet my job, there are a few reasons as to why I'm still here. One of them is that I'm the best at doing this job. You're not the first god to have intervened in my business before. He sighed as he twirled the sword. True name unsealed. The watchman narrowed his eyes as Hemera paused in surprise. While there are many with true names, having a true name meant that they will forever be in their weakest state unless it is revealed, but when that happens, the burden on their body will increase dramatically. Having one's true name unsealed is essentially a berserk skill of a berserk skill. For him to be able to contest against a god despite having his true name hidden, it meant that his real power was probably higher. Opening his mouth, he spoke in an unfamiliar language that Hemera couldn't comprehend. You can simply call me Administrator 3, but that's an old title now. I'm fired after all. After Hemera dragged the watchman away, both Nantion and Edvamar were freed from their restraints as Nantion felt as though he was about to fall into a coma at any moment. However, before he passed out, he had to warn the three in the next room. With Hemera delaying the watchman, they should be able to get back to Earth so that they could put some distance between them. While Shiro was suffering from the backlash, they had items to send them back, so they didn't need to worry. Limping over to the door, he was barely able to open it as Lysandra, Madison, and Isilia looked over at him in shock, surprised that he would return with blood all over his clothes. Isilia could see that Edvamar was also barely hanging on as he followed behind Nantion. What happened? Isilia asked in shock as she rushed over to the two. Don't worry about us right now. The most important thing is that you take everyone here back to Earth, including Edvamar. The watchman is here and Hemera is delaying him right now. We don't have time to spare. Nantion forced out as he glanced towards Shiro, who at his point had completely destroyed her throat, and even without the silencing spell, she was barely able to make a sound. Hearing, Isilia's face paled as they thought they would be safe in space, but that was false. With how injured Nantion was and how Hemera was forced to hold him back, Isilia understood that this wasn't something they could fight right now. Quickly reaching into her inventory, she pulled out a teleport node, but before she could activate it, a sword shattered it to pieces. Recognizing the sword, Nantion's face paled as he immediately turned around to see an unconscious Hemera being dragged by the back of her neck. Asterisk bang. Throwing her body behind the party, the watchman approached the party. Repel, chain, seal. Forcing the party against the wall and restricting their movements, he stood in front of Isilia. Looking at the towering figure of the watchman, Isilia could feel fear gripped her heart, as not even a goddess could stop this person from arriving before her. Wanting to take a step back, Isilia realized that her body had been paralyzed completely. Suddenly, a shadow appeared behind the watchman as Edvamar broke out of the restrictions using the previous method that they had discovered. Swinging his sword, he couldn't help but curse in his mind when he saw the sword get parried with a single finger. Run! Edvamar shouted out as he threw the teleport node towards her. However, The watchman sliced it in half as he grabbed Edvamar's head and slammed it against the ground. Asterisk crack. Fracturing the floor, he could see that Edvamar was knocked out cold as he was already nearing his limit after the last encounter. Glancing down at his hand, he furrowed his brows before sighing. Seems like I have 2 prisoners to take with me instead of 1, he muttered, realizing that Edvamar was not someone who should be on this side either. Shaking his head, he figured that he should reinforce things once he returned back to his realm. Turning back to Isilia, he pulled out an emblem from his cloak. Sensing danger next to him, the watchman quickly stepped back as he watched red circuits rush past him. What the F***ck are you doing? Shiro squeezed out as her eyes were bloodshot. Her face was completely pale, but even in this state, she wasn't going to back down. While laying on the bed, she could sense the mana running rampant as Edvamar shouted out run. Forcing the activation of a berserk skill, she jump-started her own body as she was barely able to use error to attack the person in front of her. Asterisk cough. Coughing up a mouthful of blood, Shiro kneeled in pain before getting error to spread itself through the room. Asterisk bang. However, before she could do anything, she felt an unstoppable force collide into her as she was flung against the wall. Why do you all meddle? Irritating. The watchman frowned as he crushed the emblem in his hands. Suddenly, a dagger appeared within his grasp. Flickering in front of Isilia, he didn't hesitate to stab her in the chest, as all Isilia could do was widen her eyes and watch in silence. Nimue, Shiro shouted out in her mind as she was going to force her body, even if it meant that she had to disable her links once more. Don't talk, just act. Nimue shouted out as she was already struggling, but Isilia's life was in danger now, and she knew how important it was for Shiro. Hearing this, Shiro didn't hesitate to activate all of her berserk skills since they didn't require mana to activate. A pulse of pain shot through her body, but compared to losing Isilia, this was nothing. Stomping down, Shiro dashed forward as she brought out Sylvanes and slashed towards the watchman who had stabbed Isilia in the chest. The most up-to-date novels are published on lightnovelworld.com. Unfortunately, her attack fell short as she felt her body collapse from the stress. Falling forward, she was overwhelmed by the pain as it was difficult to even move an arm. I suggest you give it up now. Your body is already suffering from a backlash, and now you're pushing yourself towards death at a faster pace. You cannot change the outcome. The watchman looked at her with pity as he twisted the dagger. Feeling her body weaken, Isilia stumbled back. Blood started to pour from her mouth as her eyes dulled. Collapsing onto her knees, she looked towards Shiro, who was barely able to lift her head up. Forcing a smile, Isilia knew that her fate was sealed. Sorry, look after Lyrica for me, okay? Isilia muttered as she fell forward. Tears started to fall as regrets piled up in her mind. She wanted to watch Lyrica grow up more. She wanted to see her daughter find love, get married, maybe have children. She wanted to live the rest of her life with her husband that had just returned. She wanted to see Shiro save the world. She wanted to see her best friend find her own happiness after having everything robbed from her in Aria. She wanted to see Een eat the delicacies of the world and enjoy life to its fullest. She wanted to see Lysandra open up a bit more since she was a quiet child. She wanted to see the future of Aria and the people living there. There was so much she wanted to see, but that was now impossible. As she fell towards the ground, her gaze softened as a single thought came to her mind. Oh, I don't want to die, she thought with a sigh. There was more that she wanted to say, but she could no longer move her mouth. I'm sorry, Lyrica. Mum needs to leave again. I'm sorry. Collapsing on the floor, blood started to fall as Isilia stopped moving completely. Glancing down, the watchman tugged on an invisible chain as a faint figure of Isilia appeared. Grabbing one of the capsules, her soul was transformed into an orb of light before being stored away. With Isilia captured, he looked towards Edvamar and did the same. Plunging the dagger into his back, he dragged an illusionary figure of him out before securing it into a capsule. With his job done, he stood up and prepared to leave, but halted his steps when he sensed killing intent behind him. Glancing back, he was shocked to see Shiro standing as her body should be completely broken right now. What is she? He thought to himself as Shiro glared at him. Her blood-red eyes glowed with malice as fury filled her mind. This was the person who had just taken her best friend's soul. There was still a chance of her being able to retrieve it if she's quick enough. Suddenly, Shiro's body disappeared as the watchman immediately brought out his blade and raised it above his head. Asterisk clang. Looking at the white-haired girl in front of him, he wasn't able to hide his surprise as her attack had weight behind it. She had already destroyed her body. There shouldn't be any possibility of her being able to move right now. Sensing that something was wrong, he immediately inspected her, as there was a high chance that the system was trying to do something right now. The moment he saw her name tag, his eyes widened since it was darkening at an increased rate. From the pristine white, it was now a dark gray. Shiro LVL 760 Nanotech Demigoddess. But just as he inspected her, he noticed her class tag flickering as cold sweat dripped down his back. He was able to catch a glimpse of what it said, and it filled his mind with dread. Shiro LVL 1000 Destroyer. If someone was to reach level 1000 immediately from becoming fallen, that meant the potential they had was enormous. He couldn't risk something like that being released into the world. Pushing Shiro back, his aura flared as he glared at the white-haired girl. He couldn't let her live. Bringing his sword back, he was about to swing when a figure materialized between them. While he didn't recognize them, he could tell that they are a god from their aura. The figure had a pair of emerald eyes and lush green hair. Waving her hand, 2 tier 8 magic circles appeared around her. Suddenly, the watchman found himself in the middle of a flower field as he paused in confusion. While he knew that he was in a divine domain, he didn't know what led up to this point. What was the source of his killing intent? It was strange, but his mission was complete, and he wasn't about to fight another god. Opening a portal, he glanced back one last time. He could faintly make out the figure of a white-haired girl kneeling in the flower field with tears streaming down her face. Feeling pity for her, he couldn't help but sigh and step through the portal, leaving this dimension. Watching the person leave, Gaia sighed in relief as she didn't expect to have to use this much power just to make sure that her domain worked properly. However, she couldn't worry about that right now since her main concern was Shiro. With the deployment of her domain, she was able to calm Shiro down and knock her out, forcefully stopping her from becoming fallen, but there was no guarantee that she wouldn't transform the moment she woke up. Sighing heavily, she dispelled her domain and picked up Shiro's body before placing her on the bed. The most up-to-date novels are published on lightnovelworld.com. Gaia didn't know whether she should be happy or sad about how Shiro wasn't feeling the pain anymore. She was happy that Shiro didn't have to go through it, but sad since it meant that she had truly kept up her body this time. It was going to take a while for her to properly recover from this. Looking over at Hemorrhous avatar that had just disappeared, she hoped that the backlash for her would be minimal or else Nyx would be sad. Turning to Nantion, who was barely holding on, she sighed. Don't let her fall, Gaia said as she glanced at Shiro one last time before dispelling her avatar. Nodding his head, Nantion lost consciousness. Arg, snapping her eyes open, Shiro felt a wave of pain flood her body immediately as she felt like her soul was about to be ripped out. Forcing her eyes shut, she tried to remember what had just happened and realized that Icilia had been taken away when Gaia appeared. Quickly looking around her, she wanted to see Icilia's face, reassuring her that everything was okay. However, when she looked around, she only saw the wounded figures of Madison, Lysandra, and Nantion, who had been restrained by the watchman when he entered the room. Sleep some more. Your body's not recovered yet. Nantion forced a small smile. Opening her mouth, Shiro wanted to ask where Icilia was when she realized her throat had been completely destroyed. Her natural healing had halted, and she wasn't able to repair her body passively right now. Don't think about anything right now. Just rest up. Nantion sighed as Shiro couldn't even move her body right now. We'll get Sylvia here soon so that she can stabilize your condition. Glancing to the rest of the party, Nantion gestured for them to follow her. Seeing the three about to leave, Shiro felt a wave of panic in her heart, as though something had just pierced it. Called out for them in a hurry. Shiro tried her best to reach out, but wasn't able to move her arm. Don't go, she called out in her mind as she didn't want them to disappear like Icilia. What if the watchman was still around? What if he wanted to get the others too? Seeing Shiro's panicked face that was on the verge of tears, Nantion smiled softly and sat next to her. Don't worry, we're not going far. Just out of this room. Nantion smiled, but Shiro tried her best to shake her head. Grabbing his sleeve, she didn't want to let them out of her sight anymore. Seeing Shiro panic like this, Nantion felt his heart being crushed. Sighing softly, he decided to look towards Madison and Lysandra. I guess we can talk here. How should we break the news to Lyrica? Nantion asked as Madison's body tensed up. Her friend had just gotten her family back, but before she could even enjoy it for a day, they were taken away immediately. It was a cruel joke for her. A brief taste of happiness before despair. I'll tell her. I think it's best that we get Sylvia here soon though. With what you had said, Shiro's recovery functions seemed to have been halted. Without her being able to heal herself, it's going to be risky. Madison sighed. "MN, how are you feeling, Lysandra?" Nan Tian asked as Lysandra's wings had turned gray after Shiro had almost transformed. He wasn't sure what kind of repercussion this could bring, but he hoped that it was small. "I'm feeling fine. It's just that my wings are dyed now. I'm more worried about Lyrica." Lysandra shook her head. Hearing this, Shiro couldn't help but bite her lips when she remembered Lyrica. She didn't know how to face her after letting her mother and father get taken right in front of them after she reassured with such confidence that space was safe for them. Plus, Lyrica had wanted to come so they could have at least spent more time with each other. "I'll be right back, okay? I'll go bring Sylvia." Nan Tian smiled as he pulled out a teleport node from his inventory. Furrowing her brows, Shiro shook her head once more and tried her best to keep her grip on his sleeve. But even with her trying her best right now, she could barely exert any strength. Seeing this, Nan Tian sighed. "Let's bring her back with us then. There's no more point in us staying here," he suggested as the other two nodded their heads. Pulling out a normal wheelchair for Shiro, Nan Tian tried to carry her onto it, but each movement would cause Shiro's entire body to spasm from the pain. "Sorry, bear with it, okay?" After placing Shiro on the wheelchair, he opened the portal back to Asharia. Thankfully, it wasn't far from the med bay, so it was easy for them to find Sylvia. Your BA." Widening her eyes, Sylvia paused in shock. Shiro was disabled on a wheelchair, which was normal at this point, but the problem was her gaze and aura. It seemed weak while her gaze was fearful. For Shiro to have a fearful look in her eyes like a child who was scared of an unfamiliar place, Sylvia immediately understood that something was wrong. Quickly standing up, she walked over to them. "What happened? Tell me everything," she said seriously as Nan Tian nodded. "I will. Can you first stabilize Shiro's condition? It seems like her natural healing factor had been halted." Nan Tian nodded as Sylvia furrowed her brows. Activating a Tier 5 magic circle, she did a quick scan on Shiro's body and stepped back in disbelief. It wasn't that her healing factor was stopped. It was that there was too much damage being caused to her body that the healing seemed stagnant. Her body was a complete mess, and if you combine it with the fact that her soul's injured, she was essentially hanging on by a single thread. Should that thread break, she'll die? To make matters worse, her links have been completely fried. Until the body is completely healed, it would be a miracle for her to access mana at all. For a spirit, it must be suffocating for Shiro right now. There isn't much I can do. Most of her wounds seem to be resistant to healing spells. I can boost her life force, but that's it." Sylvia frowned as Nan Tian nodded his head. "That's good enough. It's better than nothing." Setting Shiro on one of the beds, Sylvia tried her best to boost Shiro's life force, but the effects were minimal. Secretly sending a text to Sylvia, Nan Tian wanted her to cast a spell so that Shiro would be forcefully put to sleep for now. He didn't want to have a meeting in the med bay while Shiro was recovering. Glancing at him with a frown, Sylvia decided to not question it for now, since there was something wrong with Shiro's mental state right now. As fatigue washed through her body, Shiro's gaze faltered as she realized what they must have done. Closing her eyes, she drifted off to sleep. Leaving the med bay, Sylvia had a serious face while looking at Shiro, who slept silently on the bed. Even when she was sleeping, Shiro seemed restless. "Can you tell me what happened now? Why isn't Isilia and Edvamar with you?" Sylvia asked. She could guess what had happened, but she wanted to hear for herself. Explaining everything that had happened, Sylvia took a deep breath and sighed heavily. "I think Shiro might develop a trauma from this. Her willpower is usually strong, but with everything she's gone through, this might be a breaking point. If you think about it, this is the second time Isilia has died in front of her if you include what happened in Aria," Sylvia said as she remembered the fearful look in Shiro's eyes. For her to have obtained such power but not being able to do anything, it would be more surprising if it didn't break her mentally. Turning around, Sylvia looked at Nan Tian. "There are spells to heal physical injuries, but mental shocks are something else. I can calm her down at best, but it'll lose effectiveness over time. Plus, we can't keep making her run away from her fears. If we want Shiro to stand back up, we'll need her to face it head on. It's tough, but it has to be done sooner or later." "I know, but maybe we should let some time pass first before wanting her to face her fears," Nan Tian replied. We can't force it though, which is the problem since forceful methods might just break her even more. We have to encourage her and support her from behind. This might take months or even years for her to make a full recovery. There's also the chance that she might never recover," Sylvia said as Nan Tian stood in silence. "It doesn't matter how long it takes. I'll support her regardless. But I think we'll have to halt some of our plans when it comes to queens. Thankfully, I can manage the things that happen in Asharia for now, so things won't stagnate. Nantion furrowed his brows while looking at Shiro. Amen. I'll see if I can find a solution to fixing all of her injuries in the meantime. Good luck. Sylvia patted Nantion's shoulder as she made her way back to the Healers Guild. Walking through the corridors, Madison's heart ached as she saw Lyrica making her way back to the command room. Oh, Maddie, you're back. Did everything work out well? Lyrica asked with a smile as Madison took a deep breath. Lyrica, I want you to listen to me calmly, Madison said as she took a deep breath. Okay, why so serious? Lyrica furrowed her brows in confusion. Seeing the pain in Madison's eyes, a bad feeling emerged in her heart. Your parents were taken away by the Watchman. Dropping the tablet in her hand, Lyrica's body tensed up as tears started to fall.